Okay, good evening. Welcome to the August 27th, 2018 Board of Directors meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside. May we have roll call, please?
Alternate Director Eisen,
Here.
Alternate Director Harvey,
Here.
Director Warren,
Present.
I'm sorry,
He's the first
Chair
guy.
Blanchard,
Here.
Alternate Director Rohrback,
Here.
Director Boyd.
Here.
Okay. And also now we have the presentation, part B, which is a presentation of audited financial statements for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017 by John
Right.
Okay.
So I didn't want to pull this over until everybody had sat down. I didn't want anybody tripping. Let me get that. Make sure I dial the number correctly.
Could get a longer cord.
It's got to be a long cord. What happened? Disconnected. Let me try that again.
Hey, Beverly?
Hi, okay, you're here, you're live, you're next to the speaker, and the board should be able to hear you.
Fine, fine.
Excellent. Okay. So I am John Cropper. I am the auditor of the district. And I'm here with Katie Perry, who was the senior on the audit, did a lot of the work during the audit. It was a rough audit, and hopefully you all have a draft of the 23rd of August financial statements, as well as a draft of a management letter that we've written. And so I'm going to try and be brief. Katie and I, we are out of town. We're here for questions. But I do want to go through a couple key things. Can you hear me? Just Beverly, are you guys good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So the first thing I wanted to do is start with the opinion, which is what the board pays me to do. We have a clean opinion. That's the good news. You'll see on page 2 of our opinion, I have an emphasis of matter that we've inserted that talks about, well, I'll just read it. The issuance of the accompanying financial statements are substantially delayed due to ongoing problems with new software as well as personnel. These matters are discussed in more detail in the memorandum on internal control period. Our opinion is not modified with respect to this matter. So the takeaway to the board is it was a rough audit, but you have a clean opinion. I'm going to get into a couple things that the finance committee has asked me to report back to them on. But before I do that, I want to go to the balance sheet on page 8. You guys have your financials. I'm looking for my page 8.
And it's page 16 of the PDF for the whole report.
Yeah, I'm not on a PDF, so I'm
Right,
Yes, that's it.
just for those that are looking online.
okay.
So this is a statement of net position?
The
Yeah.
statement of net position.
Okay, so the one concern that I want to point out on the bottom of page 8, not on a PDF, so I know it's a little bit of a problem there, but it's on the statement of net position. The statement of net position, I'll use assets, and then you've got not that many liabilities, but there is, most of that is vested in capital assets, so over $12 million, you can see at the bottom of the page. And then the unrestricted number, which is 475,000 negative. So that I'll discuss a little bit further in my management letter, but that is an issue for me, and I think others that are reviewing the financial statements, even though we do know that the members of the JPA are, in theory, good for the money there. Now, if you go to page 9, you'll see, congruent with that kind of thought pattern, there's an operating loss of $1.3 million, which if you come down to the bottom, the net change in net position is a loss of $730,000. There is depreciation up above of a little over $1 million, but as an auditor, we like to see that provided for, so that when there are problems, repairs can be made and there's working capital. And of course, you can see also on this page there's a judgment of $600,000. Okay, so those are a little of the highlights with the financials. If you go with me to page 33, which is the last page in your notes, I have put a note 13 management plan in there. Now, just so you're on board with my thought pattern, I considered issuing what we consider a going concern opinion in our opinion, but I felt that it was, when I read through it, that I could go with the new standard, GASB standard, and issue what's called an alleviated going concern, which is what we have here in note 13, management's plan. So if you read through that, you basically see that I state some of the things that I've already mentioned, that we had an operating loss of 1.3, we had a change in an overall decrease in the net position of 731,000, and that the authority had unrestricted net position deficit of $475,000 at the year end. I think the authority, of course, will be in business. I don't think that the members, would ever allow it to go south. But, I have to protect myself, and I haven't seen this. This has been a rough year so far as, I think, from what I could read in the minutes, so far as, sticking to the $1.25 million reserve and the 2 months operating expenses that are, I think, are consistent with the authority policy. But more than that, I think it also goes to what the potential vendors and the contractors are, the reputation of what's happening out there with Sam. So those are the highlights. I'm going to stop until we answer any questions that you have, and then I'll go briefly into the management letter.
John, this
Any
is
questions?
Director Warren. The one thing I'm having a hard time understanding.
Turning it down just a sec. I got to turn this up. That's great. Okay, sorry, my phone. I missed any questions that were there. I turned it down instead of up. Can you say any questions over?
What I'm having a hard time understanding is the total of money in various bank accounts plus LAIF is approximately the same now as it was at the start of the audited period. So I don't understand the big negative numbers that you're mentioning.
Yeah, unfortunately, these are GAAP-basis financials and have very little to do with cash. You can look on the balance sheet on page 8, go back there. And so you have 2.2 in cash. you've got some deferred outflows, $800,000 in assets. So you have $14 million in assets, but, you know, you can't, you've also got, go ahead, Katie.
I'm just saying, like, unfortunately, most of the assets are underground, so they are assets, but they're not available for sale, per se.
And I think what their point was is that, you know, if you go to the cash flow, maybe you could take me there, that they have $2.2 million between the accounts. But that is not the reserve. So the way it works on GAAP accounting is you take your assets, you minus the liabilities, and then you come up with what you have left to spend. And that's my point when I tell you that you have negative $475,000. There is no money when you consider the liabilities and obligations of the district. And that's GAAP basis financial. So when somebody comes and looks at your financial statement, the first thing they look for is that number that says, how much is in my checking account after I pay all my bills? And that's $475,000 negative. That's how an auditor or somebody that is looking to lend you money or et cetera would look at that. And I think that I need to underline that. It's not how much cash you have in the bank.
Does this factor in, I forget what the timing was, does this factor in that there were special one-time assessments from the member agencies to fund the big pipeline repair?
No, this is June 30, 2017. So this was before the board took any action with regards to additional funding.
So as of the end date that's covered here, June 30, 2017, what are the outstanding liabilities? There's a number here, but...
Okay, so for the audit purposes, if you look on page 8, you see what the outstanding liabilities are. And some of them have to do with pensions, some of them have to do with just normal bills. You can look on there. As Katie stated, the big dominant thing on your balance sheet is $12 million in stuff that's buried in the ground. Net pension liability, you're kind of, you could look at it this way. If you paid off the net pension liability of $2.3 million that you owe to your employees, you would have no cash. If you got your receivables in, you get another $322, but then you have OPEB benefits. And there are a lot of, in today's world, after GASB 68 and 75, we never really provided for those, and all the districts and all the cities are getting hit very heavily on those. And the next thing that's going to get hit, you think, well, what else could they do to us? And I believe that they will start to think about deferred maintenance. And so when your infrastructure is judged as old and you haven't provided for that, this is not a GASB, this is GASB according to John. I sit with people that are, I eat lunch with GASB members occasionally, guys that, are kind of talking about what's happening next. And I said, well, what more can they do after GASB 68, 75? And they said, it's deferred maintenance. So when somebody says to me, well, we got a non-cash item on the P&L of $1 million, so we're not really 1.3 in the hole, we're only 300,000 in the hole. I say, maybe on a cash basis, you're right, but on a GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board basis, which is full accrual accounting, they would like to provide for that depreciation, which would run even more of an expense. So, that's things are going. I'm not trying to be anything other than very, very honest and frank with the board. I know you've had the last thing you want to hear after what happened with your accounting staff and you're trying to make good changes with a good accounting system and trying to do the right thing, is to hear your auditor go, wait a minute. But I am saying, wait a minute, I really do think if you read my management letter, you'll see I really think you need to have more working capital and prepare. And we audit other JPAs, and your JPA agreement hasn't been updated in years. That's kind of a good thing to do because things do change. One of the things that the Finance Committee tasked me with is looking at some of the billings, and I went and sat down with Delia and Granada. Yeah, I think, is Delia with Granada or?
Yes.
I can't remember. And she's a hardworking person. She and I looked at her issues. And by the way, I went back and agreed for the last 3 years, everything in QuickBooks, to these statements that were being given to, I guess, each member agency. The first thing that crossed my mind is, why are we giving money back to the agencies?
Well, let me explain that.
You can do that, but I think it should be by resolution on the board. I don't think there's the staff, it's proportional, and, when you get that money in, you give it to the district proportionally. So if you want the money back, you could do that, but it certainly weakens the district. So that wasn't my main point. My main point was, when I looked at things with Delia, and I got to 2017, where we had problems with the system, it was very hard for me to use the system because even during the audit, we were trying to fix the system. But we did some reconciliation, and I vouched and agreed the invoices, and they were just fine. But what, I don't know, for some reason, she was looking at apples and the district was looking at oranges. You got problems with dates didn't match up, stuff like that.
So your recommendation is after 42 years of having a JPA agreement that was written as an emergency measure in 1976 that we should probably make changes to it at some point?
If I heard that correctly, yes, I think so.
Interesting, we've heard that from a lot of
I would
parties.
start with changing is I would definitely get rid of this reimbursement process. I kind of felt like when I talked to people that it was a little subjective as to, not necessarily recently, but I heard folklore about reimbursements, having to happen differently with one district versus another, having to do with, say, insurance. And, their deductible being covered by the JPA and others weren't getting it reimbursed. It just created a bad, uneven field. Now, I wasn't auditing, specifically that was the purpose, but I'm just telling you, I think that the member agencies should be contributing and strengthening the JPA and not doing some of the other things that I was observing in the notes and through some of the stories that maybe...
If I might pitch in, the reimbursement had to do with, we allocated budget.
You're talking about refunding.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, he switched from saying refunding to reimbursement.
right, but what we're talking about is, we set a budget based on the projects that we anticipate at the end of the year, based on what was actually spent, the as spent. If there was a delta, if we had over allocated, return that to the member agencies who own this agency, keep the money at home for the member agencies,
So
This came
so, okay, so
this
you and
came
I-
out of,
we-
hang
we
on,
differ.
I have a little more to say here. This came out of practice of discovering that over allocation of budget had been quietly set aside by the manager at the time to create a slush fund. We didn't believe that this provided very good cost accounting. So we wanted to maintain the funding in the member agencies, which are their own separate legal entities and have their own reserves and have the ability to fund as needed. It was simply a question of where we would keep that money. That's where that policy came from. This is not some magical thing that we spun out of nothing. This came out of observation and a determination to have tighter rein on the expenditures.
Specifically transparency, with the agency keeping the over budgeted money, there's no transparency for how the reserves are funded, and the reserves need to be explicitly funded, not secretly funded.
The purpose of the audit is to validate and make sure that the board has somebody look at the finances, and that's what we're trying to do. You're the oversight, and I am not setting policy. I am not trying to do operations. I'm simply trying to say, look at other JPA agreements. I mean, I have never seen one that has the kind of work that you're throwing on the JPA to refund money. The money, I just said several times, you're short $475,000 to get to zero. I mean, that is a slush fund or anything close to it. This entity is a separate legal entity. And if you do feel that, you're all contributing equally. So, if you feel you've got money there and you want the money back, every once in a while, maybe you do go, hey, we got $5 million. Let's go ahead and allocate it in the same percentages back to the member agency.
Well, we did a follow-on action to the policy for the refunding of the over allocation. We did a follow-up, and we've done this now, I believe, 3 times since, of setting the reserve levels for each of the reserves that we have designated. What's happened starting in about 2008, 2009, when the economy turned upside down, we started dealing with trying to both avoid rate shock to our rate base and to deal with some of the difficulties that specifically Half Moon Bay had with its ability to finance based on some external activities that impacted the city. We started doing things to tighten up spending, and we started spending down reserves specifically at Half Moon Bay's request in order to avoid any kind of cash flow impact to the city. Where we can clearly make some improvements is to establish funding to the reserve levels that we all agreed to in times past.
I agree.
And that
I think
that
there you go.
we should not be looking at the refunding policy as how we fix that. What we should do is fund the thing that we said we're going to fund, and this is an action that the people at this table can do something about. This is an action that we've been attempting to do
really
now for
like
some
what you
time.
said. I really like what you just said about the reserve, because that's the policy that's been set at 1.25, plus I understand two months operating. I don't think it's a good idea to go through the exercise that is currently happening. I think that it makes, from what I could see, it makes it a little unfair to other agencies.
How's that?
For my example, would be what happened with insurance. This predates, I think, Beverly, but when I think that you have insurance through the district to help the member agencies, but it's not the sole purpose of really the
Each agency has the opportunity to share in the policy that Sam carries. Agencies can choose to opt out,
Right.
and so this isn't about.
That's fine.
That's all that is, and That's something
Okay,
that's up to
but
each agency.
what about-
There's no
what
question of
about
fairness on that
deductible?
one.
Who should pay the deductible?
Who should pay the deductible? Depends,
For
wouldn't you
the
think?
member agencies, who should pay the deductible?
It would depend entirely on whether the responsibility fell to the agency or to Sam. If it's to
I
Sam,
can't
Sam
see it
should,
ever applying to Sam,
I'm sorry?
but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, from an outsider looking in,
Sam
and trying,
car-
you know,
Sam
that was
carries
what I
an-
was trying to audit. I
Sam
would
carries an
say that all the deductibles, you know, should be where the member agency has the insurance and needs the insurance. They have a deductible there. It has nothing to do with Sam.
Sam also
But
carries
that-
insurance. Sam also has people in the field. There's 4 parties involved in this, all of
Okay.
whom need coverage.
Well, and
Yeah.
just to clarify what John's referring to is there was a decision at one point, and it did predate me, that for the coverage, our umbrella coverage that the member agencies opt into to cover their collection systems, the decision was made that, the cost of those reimbursements, because most of our claims fall below that deductible amount, Sam should pay.
Well, if we've taken policy action, then that's not a matter of unfairness, that's a matter of board policy, and all 3 are party to that policy. If that's the case. If it's not the case, we can re-examine it, but I promise you, on the
I think
grand
it
scale of
eliminates the
things,
problem.
in the big picture, even if there was gross unfairness, it would never rise to any kind of significant amount against things like what's happening with the reserves. Right? We're not talking about millions of dollars, we're talking about thousands of dollars.
You know, you're right, but I will tell you that I've been watching the process probably more than I normally do, starting last December. You know, we were trying to figure out, you know, why do we not have a trial balance? Why, you know, what's going on with the employee that was there? We learned about her problems, and we rode with that for a while. We saw other things when I talked to other people in member agencies. They go, you know, they should be able to do these requests that we have. But there, you know, it's not like there's a big staff there. In fact, I think Beverly and I probably worked more together than I've ever worked with a manager or district manager. You know, probably because of the circumstances to a large degree, but, you know, I guess what I'm kind of saying is when you make work for the staff, we saw some of that, okay? We saw some of that, and one of those things actually has to do with the JPA agreement. And I went up and took half a day and tried to understand what Delia was doing under advisement from, you know, the finance committee to try and get comfortable with that. And, you know, I could see there's definitely, you know, in my way of looking at it, the tail wagging the dog a little bit. I think the district is a separate entity. It needs to be run like a separate entity, and it should be taking orders.
Okay, but are we talking about the audit and our financial?
We are talking about my management letter at this point. So I'm 100% making some. This letter is byproduct of the audit. But if you ignore this letter, you will find yourself with possibly a going concern opinion next year. You need to pay attention to what is in this letter. There are 3, not 1. There are 3 material weaknesses. What a material weakness means in the audit world is if you have a material weakness, the financial statements that I sign my opinion to potentially could be wrong, and I don't know it. And that is running the risk up, and that's running the price of your audit up too. You have several significant deficiencies, of which I have actually listed the JPA agreement as one of them. I don't know if it was a significant deficiency, but it was not something that I wanted you to ignore. I am not going to run operations of this district. You are. You may or may not appreciate the work we did, but I can tell you, we took this very seriously, and we put a lot of extra time in, and that may not have come out because it is August, and we're over a year late getting ready to do another audit. So my heart goes out to the district in some way. You guys are volunteering, put your time in. Beverly's putting her time in. Everybody's working hard, and I think we need some radical changes. And that's a long management letter. It's not. Yeah.
So what I was asking about was, I mean, it's one thing to come in and take a look at the agency and form some opinions about things that you might do differently if you were here and had these responsibilities. But I see some of those as things that I think we want to take under advisement. But I want to make sure that we are carefully circumscribing the responsibilities of the audit and understand where those are, and so that when we're looking at these things,
I'm hearing you're saying your auditor is a little bit out of bounds.
Some people might find that opinion to be the way. Some others might not.
I'm asking.
One person's
Excuse me.
talking.
Excuse me.
I'm just saying.
I'm trying to engage over the phone, which is more difficult than usual.
Please, but I'm trying to give back and forth.
If you could please.
Go ahead.
I shouldn't need to ask. Look, so I'm sorry. Where I was going. Look, I'm not sitting here trying to bust your chops on this. That's not what I'm trying to do.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that we focus as clearly as possible on the things that. Look, let me just give you an example. Someone comes in, they look at the JPA, they try to read it, and they look at some of what's happening, and they go, clearly, throw out the JPA, time to redo it. I can understand how someone would come to that conclusion coming in on things like this. Having been doing this for 20 years myself, I've had that opinion and many others over the course of that 20 years. It's not a great document. However, let me point to well over 40 years of this agency working under that agreement. So if we're looking at something, I'm a little reluctant to immediately jump to the notion of we need a radical change on the structure of the JPA based on your observations. I differ
100%. I'm sorry. You have no money.
No, it's not.
You have your auditor,
and that's where I want to talk to you. That's where I find the most interesting things, and that's where I'm confident we have common ground. I'm just saying it's but looking at the JPA itself as part of the founding structure of this organization, I'm going to note that we had over 40 years of operation that these concerns did not arise. I don't believe it's the document per se. I think the best thing we can do is focus on the concerns that you have identified about the money. I think we need to speak very plainly about that, and I believe that you have in your write-up. I just want to be. I'm concerned about prescriptive comments about how to go about addressing some of these things when I can offer you some very detailed comments from my side about how I think we could fix these things. I've already mentioned the reserve policy.
Is this Leonard? Am I talking to Leonard?
No, this is Scott.
Oh, Scott, okay.
I mean, I've already mentioned the reserve policy. And I saw you warm to that and say, yeah, you should be funding according to your reserve policy. We don't have any, there's no gap between you and me on that point.
Great.
We have established some policies and procedures. I'd like to talk about identifying the financial issues, some of the controls issues, like you've identified about what's happened with, like, say, our computer systems. Those are great. I just want to make sure we're really focused on those things, because I think that's where the real stuff is.
So do you allow other people,
Okay, but
can you
I-
point
but
to
I-
me when it's
I
my
would-
turn to talk?
I would ask this of the board, and I'm,
Actually,
and
he's running.
talk
Alright,
now
Gavin,
to
thank
you, because I am curious on this, okay? So we had a letter for 16 that talked about reserves and working capital, and we were concerned that something may happen, and it did. It happened a couple months later, and there was no money. And I don't want to say mismanagement, but I don't know that if you had the repairs, you know more about the repairs there, but I do see a $600,000 fine. And I don't know how related that is to the reserves and working capital, but my guess is that some of that could have been mitigated. But if I'm the state and I come in and I look at your financials and I see what's going on, I don't know that I'm coming in not studying the issue, but I kind of get that when you are short working capital, it costs you more money.
Right, but
And-
each member agency has additional money in the reserves, and for each of these things has come through with all the money that was needed. I agree with you about the available cash flow, and any kind of constraint on that might wind up making us less efficient. I agree with you on that, but
Yeah,
please don't forget
And I
that,
will say this, I am happy to be your auditor for this next year. I think it would be very tough for an incoming auditor to read this management letter and say, I'm on board. But I do think that after this year, if we haven't corrected these things, I don't know that I can continue with the engagement. I want the board to take this letter very seriously. And I know that probably sounds like the tail wagging the dog, and I don't want to do that. But I'm
I don't want you,
really,
I don't want you to misunderstand what I was getting at. I want to make sure we focus hard on the issues in the audit, especially around,
okay,
I mean, it's just, I think if we don't focus real hard on these things, if we start talking about all the other things, it's, you're making it very clear, there's some things here that need to be dealt with, and I don't think any of us disagrees with that. I think
Okay.
it's a matter
Good.
of like really focusing like a laser beam on these things.
excellent. And even if half of them are dealt with, I mean, 'cause there's a lot of them listed, I'd still be happy, but I think we need to be a team a little bit, we gotta, and that's sounding a little corny, but I kind of think everybody's gotta be a one mind and trying to move everything forward and unite, and without everybody kind of being on the same team, it's just not possible to reach the full potential of the agency. And I think that all of its members would benefit by that. So how do we reduce the workload? One way would be kind of what I'm proposing. I'm not saying that has to happen. I'm saying look at the JPA agreement, and if you guys decide different than me, fair enough, let's move on. But I don't think you'll find another JPA agreement that they give money back monthly. Is it quarterly? I can't remember.
Yearly,
But yearly. Is it yearly?
after the closeout of the budget, yeah.
Of the audit, yeah, okay. But, that's probably not helping the reserves, so, I mean, I think they're related.
It's not related. The funding of the funding of the reserves is an activity that the agency decides to take on in a given year. So if we want to fund the reserves, we will actually put that in the budget and then collect collect. There's also going to be mid-year times where if we have to spend down the reserves, management can come to the member agencies and say, hey, please, let's consider topping those back up. All those are options, but any agency can choose, to say, hey, we'd rather, don't write us a check, let's move it into the reserve. All of those are options. Nothing precludes the funding of the reserves, and the fact that cash moves around, doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right point to
And
intercept it.
Scott, by the way, 40 years, man, that's awesome. Seriously,
Oh,
serving as long as you
no,
have.
no, 20
there's
20 for
stuff
me.
that I know
Twen-
you
twen-
get that I know.
20 for me, 40 some odd for the
Oh,
agency.
20. 20, I mean, that's still a lot. Okay.
I've only been here
But,
half the
you know,
time. I've only been here
I
half.
think you guys, you deserve all the credit in the world, giving your time and talent, and you know, I'm just trying to move it along, and I hope I'm not being too bulldogish. I think I've said what I needed to say, and you know, hopefully, I think it's kind of receptive. Or it's hard to tell on this little iPhone here, but that's good. And I'm happy to come down there and meet with you once I'm back in town. But you know, for now, let's get this
John?
thing. Yeah.
John and I had discussed that in preparation for the June 30, 18 audit, that we would schedule a time that John could actually come in and meet with the finance committee and answer any concerns that they might have and anything that might need to be addressed as part of that audit.
Yeah. Right.
And so
we're
that's something.
moving towards the planning on the front end of the audit, where we actually, the people that are hiring me, get to say, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that, kind of like we did over the phone a little bit with the billing, but, you know, some of that. And
That needs
I'm
to
happy
be
to do that.
that needs to be the whole board, not
I'm
the
happy to
finance
have
committee.
more rather than less interaction with the board. So anyhow, I said plenty, I didn't mean to go on and on.
Yeah, actually, we feel,
Director Eisen, who
more
is
comments?
here on behalf of Director Ruddick, has a comment
So
or
first,
question.
yeah, well, no, many comments and many questions. Now that the floor is open. But first of all, I want to thank you guys for your service, because obviously you've been doing this for many years. But I couldn't agree more with this audit. You are an independent auditor, are you not? Just for the record.
100% independent.
Thank you.
100%. I appreciate you for noting that fact, because that is critical. Not only are we independent, we're a PCAOB auditing firm, which has another standard. We are peer reviewed. Independence is a big deal today.
Yeah, it is, especially in this group. So I think that's very important to note. First of all. Second of all, you've pointed out quite a few of the things that we have thought about for a long time now. So I'm happy to see many of your recommendations, if not really all of them, and in your letter. But the big piece that stands out to me is that we're talking about an organization that's been having an operating loss for the past 7 years, correct?
That's my understanding.
Only when you factor depreciation.
When you factor depreciation, right? And we have equipment that is
Yeah,
in
Amy said
need.
she looked back on the website for all those years. So she's the one that put that number in.
So
Not
it's
7, pretty dang close.
yeah. So it's kind of scary to be going down a road where we need more funding as it is, going into further negative territory as we continue down that road. Would you agree or disagree with that comment?
100%. It shows where the district is going over time. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're trending, you would call that in my world. I don't know if
You
you
are
guys are
trending,
familiar with
yes.
that concept, but.
That is, you know, and it says, I think it says in your management discussion and analysis that over time you can tell the direction of your district by looking at that trend.
Yeah.
And it's not good.
And so I think we all need to tend to agree that we need to. I think Scott's right on the money at the start. That from the reserve perspective, that's a must, right? That, you know, we got to increase the reserves. We got to make this a solvent agency. We have to make it so we can survive and exist. That seems to be obvious to me. The big piece that I want to leave with is the Joint Powers Authority Agreement. I mean, that's such a bold topic to take on as really an auditor, and yet, from my perspective, directly in line with the complete necessity of how we move forward as this organization. So I want to say very clearly, I'm happy you pointed it out. I think it's an absolute need for the organization as a whole, and we've heard this from multiple different people and lawyers, and it's nice to hear it from an independent auditor as well.
Excellent. And it's coming from experience dealing with other JPAs, so.
Yeah, and sorry, this is Katie. We're not saying you have to scrap the whole thing, but just review it and make revisions where you feel is necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Olson?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have, okay, well, no, go ahead.
This is Leonard. Changing the JPA agreement is gonna be difficult and long and drawn out. And there's a much simpler fix, but before I say what that is, I have to mention that in my previous job functions, a slightly different career, essentially system support for mainframes. When somebody came to me and said, I want you to do this, I tossed them out, okay? They have to tell me what the problem is, not what the fix is. You're specifying the fix. The problem that you should be specifying is we don't fund reserves. And saying that the fix is to stop refunding the overages is not gonna fly here. The problem that you identified should be stated as such in your management letter, that we don't properly fund reserves. And to properly fund reserves, all we have to do is put a line item in the budget to do that. We don't have to wrestle with the JPA agreement. And there's a lot of history to the refunding. We had a manager that year in and year out inflated the budget by 10 to 20% so that he could squirrel away the money. And sometime when we're not in a public board meeting, I'll tell you that he almost got fired over that when I found out one of the stunts he pulled.
Well, I can say you're far from that right now, and I don't think you're following policy, so.
We are following
I
policy.
No,
I think-
we're not following policy on funding the reserves, and we're all in agreement on
Okay,
that.
yeah, so-
No one here has said anything other than that.
So I take exception, the management letter has this in there at least twice, taking the position against refunding. For transparency of the money flow, we have to do the refunding of the overages. Otherwise, there's no transparency to it, and that was one of the big reasons that that policy was hammered on about, I don't know, 15 or 16 years ago.
You know what? I think you guys have to readjust your thinking. You're a separate entity, and you get to do the budget, and we stick to the budget. And if you don't like the budget, then you can fire the manager. But I don't think the manager you have right now is padding anything. I think
No,
You know,
no,
what-
and no one, please, no one is suggesting that. That policy came in because of past practice long ago. It comes with history, but the key, and I agree with Leonard on this, is that the issue is that the reserves need to be funded. How we go about doing that, how we achieve that, we have many options on doing that.
There you
go. The refunding. The refunding of the unspent balance from the budget is, honestly, that's not enough money to fund the reserves. We need to focus on the thing that needs to happen and not look to the,
Yeah,
you know.
and I don't disagree with that. I mean, we hit a bad year where it took a disproportionate amount of time of your audit that I don't think you really wanted to, I mean, it's all about the hours. And so it was very expensive policy for you to have in place this year. I think it was also a lot of work for staff, and I'm just simply saying, I think you can streamline it
There's no question.
and make it easy. You know, but that's, like you say, I think you can accomplish what you're trying to do in various ways and think it through. But I simply have an opinion, and I do express it, and I'm sorry if I'm a little strong on it.
And I think it's good. I think you're looking more long-term than just a short fix, which I think is important in this agency.
Yep.
Anybody else? Anyone else?
I would be fine with it if the management letter said, you need to fund reserves.
I think there's other good stuff in here about the computer systems, the fixed assets.
Sure, but
you know,
I-
those are all good points, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, let me conclude with this. If you guys, want, this is not a final, it's not on letterhead. I'm open to wordsmithing, you know, because I realize this is a public document. Give the changes to Beverly and she can fax them over. I'll look them over. It's my letter, but, you know, I really gave it to the finance committee and Beverly. Normally I give it to management and say, are you okay? Beverly wanted to be really open and didn't want to give me any changes. She kind of took my draft and gave it to the finance committee, which, you know, I think it had something to do with just, you know, she wants transparency. Normally, you don't get it in this form, but if you want to take on her role, which I normally give to management of wordsmithing and this and that, I'm open to it a little bit, you know.
Very well done, thank you.
Any more comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Okay, am I out? Okay,
You're out.
sorry it took so long. Good deal, we'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have, item 2, any public comments? So we're gonna go on to item 3, which is our closed session now. So we can go into, now we go into closed session. I have, and the first item here will be E.
Closed session.
Closed tonight.
Waiting for Jim, actually, hang on.
Is there one more person?
Yeah, one more, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we wanna
We
continue
could
the-
probably do,
What, we now back into, open session again, and we do have information to report out. And Carl?
Yes, the board voted in closed session to extend the meeting until 9:30
Very good.
unanimously.
no, we took a second vote to extend it to 9:40.
9:40.
that was second.
9:40,
9:40.
okay,
Did we actually vote?
Yes, we did.
yes, okay, so we're going, now we're going in, do we have any comments, for public comment? Item 5. Okay, so then we go to item 6, it was the consent agenda,
I move approval of the consent agenda
Okay.
as written.
A, B, and C, we'll make it quick, sorry,
Second.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have now gone, now we have, 7A, is to review and approve the design documents of the wet weather storage facility.
Need to note that the consent agenda was passed 6-0 with
Yeah.
one
Thank you.
Director Harvey was.
There you go, good, thank you.
701.
7-0.
701, okay, let's go back.
Well,
So now we have 7A.
7-1.
7-0-0.
7-0.
7001.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which A you put first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So now we have item 7A. We're going to 940.
Yes, so this item was discussed at the August 13th meeting. The board requested that staff bring it back with regards to hydro seeding. That has been added, it's in here for your review. My understanding is that was the primary concern
Right.
for
Right.
needing to discuss it again.
Right.
Well, I have to tell you, in a 473-page packet, I didn't get to a lot of things. So where is that in here?
I'll just, you know. Do you want to go ahead and make it quick?
Page 81,
PDF page?
PDF page 81, and the specs start on page 83.
I was gonna say, did you wanna know specifically where the hydro seeding part
Yeah.
was?
Yeah.
That'll be fine.
What segment? What section is that?
Oh, the hydro seeding?
Yeah, hydro seeding specifically. Cause that would've been the only change.
Entry.
My device is searching. It's reached 370, 400,
I have it.
PDF page
Do see that.
436, 440.
176?
No, that's not it.
Oh.
It's
It just
section
says-
32, 92, 13.
Hmm?
of the
32,
specifications.
92, 13.
Division 32.
Okay, PDF page 181, is that the right place? The last paragraph on the page?
What's the number on the item?
Bid item 8. Scroll way back there. One dot.
Bid item 8, landscape restoration hydro seeding, that's on the bid schedule, but I think what Mr. Monahan was talking about was where the actual specifications were. About the describing what was being done
Okay.
for the hydro seeding.
Do you wanna talk about this? Yeah, what- yeah, please,
Well, I still need to know where that is.
you can help us, yeah.
It was
so much.
32,
So
92.
Okay, here we go. You'll
are you
help.
anticipating the possibility of, recommending modifications before we approve this?
249.
I don't know, I'd like to read what it says.
Yeah,
Because that's the hydro
Yep.
seeding. It's page,
I
it's
understand.
Yeah,
the PDF, page 249.
that's all.
So, Director Warren, we restructured this part of the specification to include specific language for revegetating native grasses in the area after reconstruction, and that the contractor employed a third-party landscape contractor to do the work. And we have this spelled out also in the separate bid item of its own, which has, we gave more teeth to as far as the restoration of the lands in all areas disturbed, anything that's disturbed during construction.
You know, looking at this fairly quickly, the thing that I'm mostly looking for is, how do we ensure that, it's done properly and meaning it takes.
Retention.
We do have language
We
in
lost
here.
that argument about retention
Here,
last time.
let him answer the question, please.
Under quality assurance, we state that the license, a licensed hydro seeding company be retained to do the work.
Where is this?
Page 249, 1.03,
1.03.
toward the bottom of that page.
In 1.03B, the contractor shall provide a 1-year warranty from the date of substantial completion to the reestablishment of ground cover to be equal to or better than pre-construction conditions. We also specify in this portion of the specifications that a pre-construction survey be done, a photo survey of all the lands, and so that we'll have, and that a post-construction survey be done as well of all the lands to look before and after so that there's no ambiguity.
Okay, now I did mention when we discussed this before that there really needs to be some consultation with RCD, since they're supposed to be coming up with a plan for restoration of our whole property. And so this needs to be coordinated with whatever RCD might recommend, which that report to us is very, very late, and the board doesn't know why.
That's correct.
The Resource Conservation District.
Yes, I'm not,
Well,
I
in the,
know,
GCSD has engaged with RCD to give us various recommendations, and they're supposed to manage some project, and we're still waiting for that.
well, and certainly as we're going through this process, we can keep RCD, I mean, we work very closely with them on other things, so we will keep them in the loop, and if something needs to be modified, we can do that once you receive that. But I don't think it would be worthwhile to hold this up, especially since we don't have a estimated delivery date on that report.
Right, I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to somehow work that in here, that they might need to coordinate with RCD?
Well, that would be on our side for project management.
yeah, and if RCD came back and said something substantially different than what we would like to do for surface restoration, we could deal with that with an amendment, or
Well,
if it's substantial.
mostly I would expect a recommendation from them on the specific plants.
Okay, we're not calling out any specific plants. It's a coastal seed mix, a five variety seed mix.
So is the project management gonna be done by Kishan? So in-house?
Yes.
Cause before, I think, you guys did it.
We assisted in the oversight of the construction, but EKI
Oh, yeah.
was tasked with the paperwork handling.
I like the language in here, based on the language in here, where it says, use of native plants. This is the hook on which we can do project management, have RCD come in and go, what you propose are or are not native plants. You can use them as experts on this, and to help validate the proposed solution, and it would be up to us under management to make sure that happens.
Yep.
Is that something we can do?
Yeah, oh yeah, we work closely with them
Does that
on a
satisfy?
variety of things.
The seed mix is specified here, if this could be certainly sent to RCD, and they could weigh in on whether they like the seed mix or not, it's specified on page 250.
And if they get the report in, they might even be able to just recommend a seed mix right out, you know,
Right.
instead of
Yep.
playing guessing
And
games.
then we can insert it right in here.
Easy
Yes.
enough to do an addendum, or if need be, a change order, just to
Yeah.
change the seed mix.
All right,
Now, I saw, when I went through this really fast, I saw something, I thought, or maybe it was in one of Chuck's emails, kind of on information overload right now about the, manhole covers and the fact that we're now planning on building a park there and might need some different kind of design. Is that in this document? I don't remember where I saw it now.
We've been in discussions with Chuck about the location of the manholes
But also the type.
and the, well, yes.
We don't want somebody running across the property and slipping on manhole cover.
Yeah, wet manhole cover.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, it sounds like the conversation with Chuck is exactly the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been having those discussions with the manager from GCSD.
Okay.
So-
In light of the time, I'm gonna go ahead and move that we approve this as proposed.
The manhole cover, that's something that, is that minutia that can be dealt with,
it certainly can, it certainly can. Chuck's concern was twofold, the number of manholes, there will be 20 total when we're all done. But that's for safety issue, these chambers are long, and it's a requirement for OSHA, a cable only goes 50 feet. And the other issue he asked for is if the final grading was to rise or lower, can we raise or adjust the height of the manholes? And the answer is yes.
I'm gonna second Scott's motion.
One question, how does it, OCD?
I think we're okay.
Okay, okay.
I just wanna make it clear that, Half Moon Bay, will vote yes on the project, but like all other IPS projects, we are paying under protest. If we, lose the, lawsuit, then we will pony up our portion, and if we win, then we'll expect reimbursement.
In the interest of putting things on the table, we note that the purpose of this project is to provide SAM the ability to efficiently operate the entire system, including the plant and everything that flows into it, including all of the uncontrolled, unregulated flow from Half Moon Bay that has the opportunity to come into the plant, in no small part because we'll be holding back flow further to the north. This allows the unimpeded flow from the south to come in unchecked, but also unimpeded, so this gives the SAM staff, the crew, the ability to operate the whole system safely. And I would note that this does not have benefit to one or two agencies, but all three, and the people who live here and the environment we serve to protect. So, understood, but I wanna make clear this has broad benefit, and it has almost nothing to do with the IPS, but instead has to do with the very core function of the agency as a whole.
And so, if this wasn't done, Half Moon Bay should be prepared to build their own 200,000 gallon storage somewhere in Half Moon Bay.
It's my understanding that Half Moon Bay has never exceeded its limit.
That's simply
The-
wrong.
We're out of time, I'm sure we'll have opportunity to
Yeah, so
discuss
everybody's
this.
got their own perspectives on these
Well,
things, so.
It's not perspective, it's facts.
Okay.
More discussion?
Perspective
But
in this
from an
data.
important perspective, in order for us to do something as critical as the bus duct repair, we absolutely have to be able to hold. So, the fact that we have 200,000 gallons now, and we can increase that to 400,000, gives us that much longer for some of these projects that are absolutely critical here at the plant, that we cannot do unless we can store somewhere, wherever that might be.
So,
We have no capacity here to do so.
I'm voting aye.
Okay.
Okay.
moving on.
Do you
Any
want a
more-
roll
any more
call
discussion?
vote, or do you just wanna,
Let's just do let's do a voice vote.
As long as the minutes note.
You're going to vote the way you're going to vote.
okay,
Okay.
so I
All
have,
in favor, say, yeah, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Maybe abstain, or,
I'm abstaining on this one.
yeah, so I think Granada is gonna abstain, two abstain. Oops.
both,
Yeah,
Okay.
let's stay consistent. But we passed, but it does pass. We got
It does pass,
abstention.
So
That's
6,
important.
0, and 2.
There you go.
6-0-2.
6 and
We
2.
appear paired together, and now we have, okay, so we have any more, come time, so we are ready to adjourn?
I just
or
wanna
anything
point out the, presentation that is included, it's been printed out, I was just going to walk through it, but you can certainly see it, with regards to the dedicated fire water
else?
line.
Right.
And, we can certainly have a longer discussion at the next meeting.
If there's no board action required on that one tonight, let's just pump that one.
Yeah,
Okay, so I appreciate everybody staying late, it's been a very long meeting, and, the closed session was been very long, but thank you for attending, and, the meeting is,